Thank you. All right, so that slide, there's a black background, and we expand on the top, which says Governor's Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and Arundel Lodge, Wednesday, May 6th, 2026, time 2 to 3 p.m. And we're doing this virtually. It should be more so in person, but we uh, are doing it virtually and we're currently using Convo relay service for the interpreters. We did do the introductions. So now we'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the rest of the agenda we'll be discussing today. First thing, it's about me and about Ursula. We'll discuss that. And then next, with the governor's office for the deaf and hard of hearing, kind of their envision, what it is. And then next, we'll just go through different vocabulary terms and the definitions, and we'll go through that. And then also what you can do like within your office, things you can do. And then at the end, we'll have some Q&A and we'll be presenting. So any questions about the agenda, if you could just type it in the chat if there's any questions. All right, so no questions. We'll proceed. Next slide, please. If you could please read 30 seconds. Okay, so I was deaf growing up. Family did not know. They actually learned about the hearing loss or deafness when I was at the age of 5. And at that time period, there was no audiology test or anything like that when they're for the newborns. So you have to wait usually until kindergarten. Once you get to school, then you take your test there for the hearing test. And I grew up orally, learned sign language at the age of 10 at the Delaware School for the Deaf in Delaware. Thank you. And
We'll be switching interpreters. So learning sign language wasn't really hard. It was something that I was able to pick up along the way. It almost felt like my first language. It was the first language that I really was able to understand. You know, Being deaf and young was a challenge. Having to lip read, having to try and get access to conversation was hard. There wasn't a lot of sign language where I was. My family started to learn when I was 10 years old. And it's important to talk about this because you'll start to notice a lot of different families have their own dynamics, especially with deafness. So when one person begins to start learning sign language or is able to finally understand about their hearing loss, it allows them to start communicating effectively. I'm going to turn it over to the next slide. Hello there. So I was born deaf. Uh, I was the only deaf person born into my family, but my entire family has learned sign language. So I can sign, but I can't speak and I can't hear. So I went to the deaf school. It was called Eastern North Carolina School for the Deaf, and I went there from the ages of 1 to 13 before we moved to Maryland. Once we moved there, we started going to Kendall Elementary School. It was the seventh grade. So this school really showed me a lot. It was a very different deaf culture that I hadn't seen before. Their ASL was different than what I had learned. I had learned signing exact English in my early education. The Kennedale Demonstration Elementary School was very different. It started to introduce me to ASL and to deaf culture, and then over time I was able to start learning here and there. But the benefit was there was deaf teachers. There was such a variety of deaf people that I was able to learn here at MSSD, the Model Secondary School for the Deaf, after I finished Kendall Demonstration Elementary. I was there for 4 years from freshman till senior. I earned an AAS in Administrative Assistant Technology from Rochester Institute of Technology and the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. And then I got my bachelor's degree in Deaf Studies from Gallaudet University. Just a little bit about me. And I just want to say we're very happy to be explaining our culture, our language to you guys, and we're looking forward to having this moment with you. I'm going to give it back to Ursula. So Tania's sign name, this is her sign name, Tania. So she graduated from MSSD. I did as well. I also graduated from Gallaudet University. We definitely went through different times, different experiences, and different journeys with different families. Through that, we got different exposures. However, we got the same pathway and the same foundation. And through that, we were exposed to the language of ASL. It is my personal belief that all families should be exposed to American Sign Language, whether hearing or deaf, because they work alongside with English. There's no wrongdoing to learn it. Everyone in America should be able to learn ASL. Next slide. So here's our mission. What's our vision here? Here at the GODHH, we want equal and full access for all Marylanders, for everyone in the state of Maryland, deaf, deaf-blind, people who suffer from hearing loss, hard of hearing. We want everyone to have full and equal access. In recent legislation from the legislative session, our goal is to insert some names to say deaf blind, because right now it just says GODHH. It's just the Governor's Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing. But we want it to be the deaf, deaf blind, and hard of hearing. It hasn't been signed yet, it hasn't been codified, but it seems like it may pass because both chambers agree to represent all people through that name. So we look forward to seeing even more inclusive language, including our deaf and deaf blind friends. Next slide, please. This is our vision, that all Maryland citizens who are deaf, deaf or hard of hearing, also deaf blind, will have equal and full access to resources, services, and opportunities for participation in all aspects of community life. The bottom line, we want independence and for people to be able to participate anywhere and everywhere. Someone had recently informed me the last time we've been able to have full expectation and participation for them was at her kid's funeral. That was the last time she felt like she was included in the aspect of community life because she was deaf and there were language barriers. Even today, there's still challenges. So for her to experience the only time to have full access into a community, the only time that she was considered was at her son's funeral. And that's a failure because she should feel included daily, every day. It should be a natural part of our society. So that is the goal of this office, to provide support and accessibility in all aspects of community life. And we're here with you as well to provide that extra support. We can't do it alone, but as we partner along with people, we can achieve anything. So I just want to say thank you for showing up. Next slide. Now, I know you're wondering how many people, deaf, hard of hearing, deaf blind, hearing loss, how many people have that? Well, the stats are showing 1.2 million people. And we got that information from John Hopkins, in case you were wondering. And this data is accurate as of 2016. We're believing that number is definitely higher. And if you include, and this is all just a very broad understanding of what it means to be deaf. So fully deaf people, we aren't really aware, but still 1.2 million is a crazy number. And we can add that data to prove, so this data is showing anyone over the age of 12. So the hearing loss is legally considered if one ear is deaf, it's hearing loss. Now, for people who are included in the deaf community, we don't really know. And now that it's starting to be another census, right? We're soon going to be starting another study on, our communities and our data. It is possible that we could be able to separate the definition of hearing loss into those who are part of the deaf community and use sign language and those who don't. But we'll have to wait and see as we work with the Maryland Department of Health. Next slide.
Interpreter, you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. Let me back up. I just wanted to give you some time to read the slide because, in the deaf community, we're not really allowed to read and see the sign happening at the same time. Our eyes can't split. So I know oftentimes in hearing societies, you'll be able to read and then like listen along and you can filter what you pick up, what you can't pick up, right? That's pretty standard in the hearing world, but we can't really do that in the deaf world. Um, I know some people assume we can, but we can't do that part. So we'd like to give a little time to read before we discuss what's on the slide. So just as other people group have culture, so too does the deaf people group. And we want to tell you a little bit about what makes our culture unique. So deaf culture talks about, it refers to the shared values, and just like where we have a first name, it could be maybe how we have a sign name. Instead of saying, hey, pay attention, it could be how we tap on shoulders to get people's attention, or we might, pound on the table to get people to look. Eyesight is so important for us, eye contact. These are all social norms that are a part of our culture. I want to think about your work environment, right? If there's anyone who's deaf or deaf-blind or hard of hearing, how do you interact with them? Maybe that person prefers you going around to their eyesight and let them know, hey, I need to talk to you, right? It's really important to check in with with deaf people and figure out what their form of communication is best. Deaf culture, it's just like we have art with our language. People think it's really beautiful. But what is the deeper meaning in the ASL, right? It's not just performative. Some words could maybe in English you have a sentence, and maybe in ASL to translate that, all it takes is one sign. We have our own grammatical structure within ASL that allows us to communicate in a different way. ASL is unique in how it communicates with two different people. ASL as a language relies heavily on visual cues, or for the deaf-blind people, tactile, using their hands to feel what is happening in the situation. There's a person, really, really intelligent man named Hawkins, who started describing deaf culture and was able to document our social beliefs through art and tradition and the history of the deaf culture and chose to describe our shared values. He talks about our deafness and how sign language is the primary form of communication for those who are deaf. So I'm going to explain as we move along, but I just wanted to get you, in front of it just before we move forward. Next slide. We're going to talk about identity. Identity is very important for the deaf community. Deaf culture is built on a sense of shared identity amongst individuals who have significant hearing loss and primarily rely on sign language. Some people who are deaf can't sign, some people who are can. You know, some might be culturally a part of the deaf community, some might not. Some might just have a medical diagnosis, and there's an entire spectrum in between the two. No one deaf person is the exact same. Some might not be able to hear and they can't talk, or they can't hear but they can't talk, and they could be part of the deaf community, but they don't have hearing loss. So there really is just a wide variety of people, a wide breadth of what it means to be a deaf person. Not every deaf person is the same. So, I identify as a deaf person. I'm not the standard, and we value the diversity in our community. What Tania is saying is very true. There are people, people who come from deaf families who are deaf. They have deaf parents, they have deaf kids, they have, and sometimes they don't sign. Sometimes they will know sign language, but they would opt out of not wanting to sign in the car or in the home. They'd rather just use, or in the school, sorry, they would rather just use CART, which would be reading captions. But there's a plethora of ways to communication that each deaf person will prefer. So we can have an open mind and heart to understand what the deaf community is. So we're focusing on key words here of effective communication within deaf culture. And there's a variety of what that means. Thank you for reading this. And this is one of the reasons I believe personally that everyone should know ASL. Or, every school could offer it as an elective at least. We already offer Spanish, we offer French. What's wrong with offering American Sign Language? Because ASL is the cornerstone of the deaf community. Sign language provides a visual and spatial means of communication and self-expression for the deaf. I just did that with you, didn't I? I was able to visually and spatially communicate what I was believing. Sign language is the means which allows me to do that. Next slide. And we're going to go ahead and switch interpreters.
So for deaf individuals, they really are aware of their surroundings. They really are dependent upon, social cues, communication, interaction. Uh, sometimes, like at an airplane, when you hop off the airplane, you're trying to follow, where everybody else is going. Sometime another example would be you're driving and the car's like maybe just stop and you're like, oh, okay, there's an ambulance maybe, and I can't hear something. Like obviously, I look around and make sure there's an ambulance. So you really are dependent upon your visual surroundings and communicating with other people. Obviously, eye contact is extremely important, and it's really we truly, are always vigilant on what's going on, who's around us, just always aware. And sometimes deaf people are able to, catch on to things really quick, really good with their eyes and can catch things definitely. Or maybe it's not just that, but the nose is smell as well with smell. They increase sensitivity, so I can smell like the rain, or I know something's coming soon. And they're like, "Well, how do you know this?" Well, I have my nose is more powerful now. It works harder because we lost another sense, so you gain uh, more in another sense. So that's pretty common in our world. All right, next slide. So this is extremely very, very true, especially for the state of Maryland. Very strong, proud, deaf population here in Maryland. So we cherish, us, our identity as, being deaf, being involved in the cultural, the language itself. We kind of decide on, how we're going to express ourselves, and we don't believe oh, you have a kind of disability and, this and that. But sometimes, they kind of label it maybe as hearing impaired or a special education, kind of a common label is where we kind of fall under, which umbrella, so to speak. But truly, we're extremely proud of our identity in general. So next slide, please. All right, so expressions. Yeah, deaf culture, expressions, everything. It's really expressive. So, like deaf art, some artists maybe use, sign language plus maybe sign it for like a flower and show like the visualization of the flower and match it up and like deaf art. And then LIT, some storytelling. There's storytelling. Typically, they use like an A, B, C story, and then like a number story, like 1 to 10, maybe 1 to 5, kind of a storytelling aspect of it. And then oftentimes it's really in regards to, their deaf experience, their identity, and and that. So we'll show you the video. I'll go ahead and show the video. I think, yeah, if you could go ahead and click the button. So this is the number story, 1 to 10, and then 10 to 1. So I'm not sure if you could catch, all the number sequence 1, 2, 3, all the way to the 10. And then it was 10 backwards all the way back to 1. And if you pay attention, you kind of follow the sequence. And at the same time, yeah, it's telling a story. So it's good to have the closed captions for those who can kind of follow along and see what she's referring to and talking about. And you can see her facial expressions were heavily, used, and her hand shapes were pretty clear with her signing. Really, really wonderful, wonderful job and using use of numbers. And thank you. Ready for the next slide? So part of the deaf culture, uh, part of being the same, we are within the same community. So that's just part of the culture itself within, the communities itself. So same kind of concept, and which is why we have the organizations in place, the churches in place, nonprofits, even some maybe have job in place. So a lot of different groups within the deaf community itself. And next slide, please. So deaf culture has like their nuances and behaviors. One example would be, how are you going to get somebody else's attention? Obviously you have to be looking at somebody and get their eye contact. Maybe you tap them on the shoulder. Maybe sometimes that's not normal for hearing people, like tapping somebody, just, You look and kind of that's just not normal. It's kind of might throw you off. Hearing people don't like to be touched. So that is a normal behavior, deaf culture. And yes, and informing information, but it's not the same for everybody. It's not. So that's why it's important to kind of check in to see specifically who you're working with, if it's your neighbor or your colleague or whoever it is, that you're approaching as a deaf person. Just check with them, and they'll be sure to tell you that their preferred method of getting their attention. And some people prefer, hey, don't call me deaf. I'm not, just maybe I'm hard of hearing. So just stuff like that. So there's a lot of varieties within the deaf culture. So we as a deaf community within, we're a sponge itself, a melting pot. Truly is a melting pot. So thank you. And to the next slide, please. Okay, so some hearing people probably not sure how to communicate with that person. Maybe how would you begin? How would you start? How would you even say hi? You just kind of wave like, okay, you should know how to wave and say hi. What would you else you do to hearing people? You say, oh, hey, 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 and kind of greet like that. That's one example that comes to mind. So yes, truly not much difference there. How you already said, hey, to a hearing person, maybe just more show your gesture or some type of movement. I was trying to think, maybe excuse me, or sometimes there's no uh, eye contact. Maybe good morning. I'm not sure if they said good morning and I missed it, you know? So just really important to maybe just pause, make that eye contact and just kind of settle down. You don't need to be in a hurry. Just make sure you see the eye contact and kind of stop and pause. And then that way we can see what you're trying to, explain to us. So just yeah, take a pause. So yeah, it's just important. Just don't be like dumbfounded and not not what know what to do, but just kind of same thing concept. You just kind of warm up to people, and the deaf person will be more than happy and willing to communicate. So yes, I agree with Shayla saying. So now some cultures, such as here, in America, we like to touch. Some maybe not, maybe mental health stuff, mental health challenges. That's just a different kind of cue, but maybe they're still deaf. Just more importantly, to maybe have the eye contact, maybe autism, maybe they don't won't look down and look at you, have maintain that eye contact. So other cultures like, in Japan, they'll do like a head nod and look down and look up. So there are some differences, but still have, some type of movement in place there. Perfect. And acknowledgement. So that's the main thing, the acknowledgement. So the next slide, please. So some deaf etiquette. Some hearing people know maybe know sign language, but maybe they don't use sign language. Just tell the deaf person, hey, that you are hearing and you're learning sign language. Just maybe a little bit. You can try. That's your opportunity to practice and improve your signing skills. And deaf people, they truly appreciate that, and they love that you're acknowledging their language and willing to learn about their language. So we as deaf people typically are always, pointing and, that's normal for us hearing people like, no, that's rude. Do not point. That's not appropriate. But us as a community, that's normal for us. And there are a ton of different ways to get a deaf person's attention. You can, like I said, tap them on the shoulder, flick the lights off and on. You can kind of tap on the floor. Maybe if it's like a wood floor, they'll feel that vibration. And the other deaf person will feel like the tapping or, just waving your hand, trying to get their attention. And just more importantly, just don't use, sorry, one second. Sorry, one second. So it's important to not scream at the deaf person or try to yell. See, you see, I'm relying on the visual and this, but I'm looking at the caption and saying, yeah, do not yell at a deaf person. So for us, that you guys work with that person, obviously it's yeah, just safe, just tap them on the shoulder, kind of get their attention, waving a light off and on would be okay. So it's really funny about that. I could see, some people using technology. So maybe they'll like text. So do you see me? Or try to call on FaceTime and be like, hey, like, okay, I'm here. But but you can still, get their attention. So it really just depends on that individual if you know them well enough and how to approach and get their attention the best way. Next slide. So this is just mentioning about, eye contact. It's important to kind of get centered in front of their eyes, which is obviously important. American Sign Language is a visual language. So with the deaf blind, might have to do tactile, so it's more touching, but still it's some type of contact. Sort of shoulder shift, looking and making sure your background, there's no like bright light like right above your head or in front of your face, and you come like half the screen you can't see, so you have to move to a different area in order your environment wherever you are, if it's outside or inside, just make sure it's good lighting and so forth. And it seems like yeah, right now we have a good lighting at that table, so pretty good. And sometimes maybe a goatee or a beard, it might be hard to see the mouth. So it's just important that the best way to communicate with that deaf individual, regardless if you're having a meal or excuse me, if it's hard to see, and just try to make the movement best within each other to see each other the best. So next slide. So can y'all hear that? So maybe the interpreter. All right, so we'll start over and have the interpreter read the captions, and we'll go ahead and switch to.
Now it's time for some DEA culture tidbits. Today we're going to talk about eye contact within the deaf community. Eye contact, I want to stress, is very, 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 very important. Before we get into that, I want to tell you a little story about myself, about why eye contact is so important and how I learned this lesson as a young boy. My father is also deaf, and you know how it is a lot of times, even in the hearing world, when parents are scolding the kid, what do the children tend to do? They cover their ears, right? They don't want to hear what their dad saying. And you as a parent feel offended. That's not very nice. Don't cover your ears while I'm speaking to you. It was almost the same thing for me, but instead of covering my ears, I would close my eyes, and my father would try and say something. If he was trying to get on to me, I would close my eyes. My father looked at me and got upset because for a deaf person to close their eyes is rude. It's a breaking away from conversation. So my father had an idea. Sure enough, uh, and every time my parents got mad at me, I would shut my eyes a lot, just like how kids tend to cover their ears and they're getting scolded. My father assessed the situation and said, okay. So one day, as it happened, as I closed my eyes, he was trying to get my attention. I closed them and he got water and splash water in my face. Okay, didn't know that could happen. From then on, I wouldn't close my eyes. I'd keep at least one open, maybe try and alternate to, because for deaf people, eye contact is very important. If you close your eyes, if you break eye contact, you look away during a point of communication, it's considered rude. So I want to suggest to you, if you work with deaf people, keep your eyes with them. If you're just talking, don't look around the room. If you're talking to them, try talking directly to them because for deaf people in their language, it is extremely important. It is imperative to use body language, to use eye contact language, to use eyebrows. Those are what deaf people are reading. That is how they're understanding your cues. Your expressions change how they read your lips. And if you're talking through an interpreter, don't look at the interpreter. Look at the deaf person. Speak directly to them. The interpreter will sign to the deaf person, and the deaf person, what are they going to do? They're going to look at the interpreter, they're going to look back at you, and they're going to alternate between the two. So for you, as one of the persons who are communicating, can help them out by keeping eye contact pointed on them, not just moving around the room, not darting everywhere, because deaf people feel like you're not looking at them if you're just, maybe you're bored, maybe you're disengaged from the conversation. Maybe you feel the deaf person's not important enough. And in our world, eye contact is imperative. It is important for deaf people to look at each other's eyes. If you're using sign language, you have to make eye contact. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. No eye contact is considered rude. So I want to encourage you, keep your eyes a part of the conversation. Maybe you're looking at a deaf person and you don't understand their sign. That's fine as well. But making the effort, going the extra yard to ensure eye contact, even during written communication, helps tremendously. You looking around the room is disregarding the deaf person's feelings. So I want to encourage you, maintain eye contact. It's extremely important in our community, and it's extremely important for deaf people. Thank you. Okay, just wanted to give you guys a heads up. We have about 10 minutes left. But I hope we were able to see how important eye contact is. It helps build relationships, and he summarizes it really well. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pause. We're going to go ahead and check in with the team, see if there's any questions that we've had so far. And I do believe we're going to have more training with you guys moving forward in some different scenarios, specifically about deaf culture. But I do just want to pause, so we'll stop sharing. So I just want to allow us to have some time to ask questions about deaf culture in the chat. Someone says, do you offer ASL classes?
Hello, this is Erica. We will be partnering with the governor's office going forward to have some micro learning, lunch and learn sessions to address some of these issues. Um, Even incorporating in onboarding and orientation, just basic how to say hello, say thank you, that sort of thing. So we're looking forward to working with them going forward to address this.
So I run a program, and yes, I want to say we do offer ASL classes. We'll offer some ASL lunch and learn courses. The GEO DHH offers an ASL club to explain more things of deaf culture and our language, and we'd love to have you involved if you're interested. Is there an official like ASL course? No, it's just going to be teaching basic language. Important things you would need to know. How do you say hi? Good morning. Good afternoon. How can I help you? Stuff like that. So for the interpreting services, we do have an agency who provides interpreting services. Do we use this agency? No. They don't offer ASL classes. That answers your question. So suppose you want to go to ASL, and you're wondering where you can learn. There's CCBC, FCC, right? Yeah. There's two. Yeah. There's CBC. Yeah. And there's a class in Frederick, at Frederick Community College, and the University of Maryland offers it. PG and Co. Community College, they offer it. Well, these are for interpreting. These are interpreting training programs. Oh, okay, sorry, I misunderstood. Okay, my bad. I think I might have misunderstood as well. If you want to learn ASL, so learning ASL and taking like an ITP and interpreting training program is a little different. I might explain how that works. So, ASL classes are just learning the language. How do I use this? How do I utilize this language? But for interpreting, this is for profession. So you can interpret between a deaf-blind, deaf and hard of hearing, and those who are hearing, and you can bridge the gap of communication there. It's considered effective communication. But ASL learning is just you just be learning the language itself, how you can chat with a deaf person. Those are two different fields. There's also deaf studies. Deaf studies is also a field if you are interested in learning more about the community. Um, it's an introduction to disability, communication, how it introduces you to a whole plethora of our culture um, at the collegiate level. So thank you for explaining that, Tania. Question, what is the best thing an agency can do to support deaf staff? From Kay Farrell, asking in the chat. So when you first receive a person, whether it be a new hire, you will have an intake, naturally. There's an intake, there's onboarding. And this is the perfect time to be able to find out their best methods of communicating, their needs, trying to understand how you can best accommodate them. And then as time goes on, you could have periodic meetings, whether it be quarterly, monthly, yearly, bi-yearly. It could just be a review to check in to make sure we're understanding what works, what's challenging, and how your office, what you can do. These aren't going to be a one-time conversation. These are going to be an ongoing conversation with this person. And another question was, can you offer the best resources to start learning ASL? How would you learn ASL? There's some apps that'll work. One is called ASL Bloom, Bloom. It'll help you learn signing. There is uh, a Signing Institute school app. You can go to YouTube, but it'd be really important to make sure it's a deaf person teaching these ASL lessons because that's going to be the best person, right? If you are interested in learning ASL, it would be best to learn from a deaf person. Okay, someone else has said, when you introduce yourself, you both said, this is my sign name. And I'm curious maybe what that means exactly. So for me, again, this is Ashurla. When I'm introducing myself, I'll say, hi, my name, and I'm going to spell it, right? Usherla. That's custom in the deaf community. But then I'm going to give you my sign name and say, hey, this is how you can address me in our language. I'll put a U on my chin near my mouth. And just like you're like, well, my name is this, but we don't know how to we don't need to know how to spell it in English because you can just hear it. You can replicate the sounds with your mouth. But a deaf person, again, we're visual. If we say, "Oh, this is my name," and I just give them the sign name, they don't know my name, so I'm still going to spell it. And also, having a sign name is pretty important in the deaf community. You don't just get given a sign name. It means a deaf person has worked with you and has given you a sign name, which allows us to know how involved you are in our community. So now someone named Kara says, I picked up a book from Barnes and Noble back in 2007, and I just started with basics and learning my name. The person served will help with you too because they love to communicate with us. Excellent. Moving on from Sandy. If someone doesn't know any or maybe knows a little limited amount of ASL, what is the best way to bridge the gap of communication? Should they try to continue communicating in ASL? Maybe use technology like voice to text or pen and paper? I'm going to let Tania take this. Truly, it depends on the person. It depends on the deaf person and their preference. Maybe they like texting. Maybe they don't mind texting paragraphs. Maybe they're going to work with you. I would just say when you start talking with them, just ask and they'll tell you. And again, I want to say it depends on the situation. Even in my neighborhood, right, in my area, if I see a lost dog, right, I'm gonna get up my phone. I'm gonna try and work with them. It all just depends on the situation and where I'm at exactly. Okay. Dimon or Daimon, uh, put links 1 through 4 on how to learn ASL. So these are a bunch of different apps that'll help you learn, as well as some websites. You can check it out, but we're gonna give it to Erica. So if you missed it, we can keep going. He's Palomeri says makes sense. Thanks. And which app is free? Asked Samuel. The signing school. I can verify that app, but yeah, the signing school might be paid. All right. Sorry, signing school is free, but the other 3 apps are going to be paid. Yes. So sign school is free. Okay. I'll be sending an evaluation link for you to fill out. And we'll get back and give back next time as we continue this conversation. We're a community together, right? It is a pleasure to meet you. And I look forward to working with you guys more as we move forward. So, hi, you, Dan. All right. Bye, everybody. All right. The recording is done. Thank you, Convo.